Alright, so here's a step-by-step tutorial on how to do the homework for tonight. This is Tuesday, the first day of school, September 3rd. These first ones should be pretty straightforward. Order of operations, you gotta do what's inside the parentheses first. 3 and negative 3 makes negative 9, minus 11 is negative 20. Alright, you got over here, exponents first, that's 16. 12 minus 16 is negative 4 equals negative 16. Alright, over here, parentheses, got your exponent. Alright, multiplication and division you can do at the same time. That's 10, that's 75, so the final answer is 85. Over here, negative 2 cubed is negative 8, right? Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Minus, this is 24, plus 50. Negative 8 minus 24 is negative 32. Plus 50 equals a positive 18. Number 9, let me scoot this down a little bit. If it'll let me. There we go. Number 9, inside the parentheses, 4 squared is 16. 6 minus 16 is negative 10. Half of negative 10 is negative 5. Over here we got a fourth. Negative 5 plus, or 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Let's see here. Inside the parentheses, negative 5 minus 15 is negative 20. 1/4 of negative 20 is negative 5. Just got to multiply the 1/4 times negative 20. If you didn't remember that with the fractions, remember negative 20 is like negative 20 over 1. 1 times negative 20 is negative 20. 4 times 1 is 4. So negative 20 over 4 is your negative 5. Alright, down here we got negative 8 times, wait for it. Alright, so 13 minus 37 ends up being what? Negative 24. Alright, yeah, sure. Alright, all over 6. Easiest thing to do here before you multiply, you could multiply and then divide by 6. I think it's a little easier if we go ahead and pretend that this 8 isn't here. Let's do negative 24 over 6. That gives you negative 4. And then you can multiply to get 32. You would get the same thing if you multiplied first and then divided by 6. Numbers stay a little smaller this way. Negative 8 squared, that's 64. 5 minus 9, that's negative 4. Notice it's a positive 64, not negative 64, because the negative is inside parentheses here. Minus, and then we got negative 1 squared is 1. 4 times negative 9 is negative 36. Let's do the division first. 64 over negative 4 is negative 16. Minus 1 plus negative 36. All right. Negative 16 minus 1. Notice again, negative squared turns positive, but does not affect the negative or the minus sign in front. All right, that's negative 17 plus negative 36. Negative plus a negative still stays negative, and that's negative 53. All right, down here are some of these fractions. A squared, or I'm sorry, A is 3/4. B is negative 8. We're squaring that, and we're subtracting D, which is 3. Okay, exponents first, that gives me 64. So we got 3/4 times 64 minus 3. Again, it might help you to think of the 64 as 64 over 1. So when you multiply, you can do 3 times 64, then divide by 4. Or what I think is easier is simplify this a little bit. 4 and 64 reduced down to 16 over 1, right? 64 divided by 4, 16. So then I got 3 times 16, which is 48, minus the 3 from over here. So you end up with 45. For number 15, let's zoom in a little bit. I'm running out of space. All right, 15, again, A is 3/4. B is still -8. C is -2. And then D is, hold on, let me get rid of him for a second. D is 3. All right, so given our fractions, think of -8 as -8 over 1. So I'm going to simplify the -8 in top with the 4 on the bottom. That gives me just regular old -2. So 3 times -2 is -6 over the -2. Oops. I need to make that eraser a little smaller. Anyway. Where was I? So this is -6 over -2. 3 squared is 9. Alright, -6 divided by -2 is +3 plus 9 equals 12. I think we did that one in class, right? Alright, here we are. B tells us is -8. Minus D, they say is 3. And here we go. E, they say is 1/3. And let's plug that in again over here. Okay. Inside the parentheses, we got to multiply first before we subtract. 3 times 1/3. There's a 3 on the top. There's a 3 on the bottom, so that cancels out. You're left with 1 over 1, which is 1. Don't forget the -8 over here. 1/3 squared. You got to think about 1/3 squared as 1 squared over 3 squared. It's kind of like distributing the exponent. So you end up with 1 over 9 on the outside over there. -8 minus 1 is -9 times 1/9. 9 on the top cancels out with the 9 on the bottom. Negative is all that's left, and the 1, so you're left with -1. All right, down here, -b. Let's see here. Be careful here. When you substitute, there's a negative that's part of the problem, and then you have a negative that's part of what you substitute in. So you got a negative. Inside, I got A, which is 3/4. I got C, which is -2, minus D, which is 3. And I'm closing that off, squaring all of that. All right. So let's start all the way inside the parentheses. I got -2 minus 3. That's -5. Don't forget, we're squaring all of that. Just outside of there, I have 3/4. And outside all of that, I'm multiplying by -8. Well, negative times a negative makes a positive. So let's go ahead and multiply, or let's do the exponent in here. I got 8 times 3/4 plus 25. Well, wouldn't it be nice if I had a common denominator? Let's make 25 somebody over 4. Well, what I did was, if you think about 25 equaling somebody over 4, I multiplied the invisible 1 down here by 4, so I'm going to multiply the top by 4 and get 100. So really I can think of positive 25 as 100 over 4. Notice again, negative 5 squared ends up being positive 100 because the negative is inside with the parentheses. I really did negative 5 times negative 5. Alright, so now I have a common denominator. 8 still outside, but now I have 103 over 4. Alright. Did I do that right? Let's just go back and double check. These numbers are getting ugly. Alright, negative 5 squared, that's 25. Okay. So now I see 8 up top, 4 in the bottom. I'm going to reduce that to 2 over 1. 8 over 4 is the same as 2 over 1. So 2 times 103 is 206. And we're done. Over here, number 21. It's because I have more space over here. We have 9 times B, they say, is negative 8. C, they say, is negative 2. And minus 1 over E, they say, 1 over E, they have 1/3. So we got a fraction within a fraction there. Alright, let's do the multiplication first. 9 times negative 8 is negative 72. Times negative 2, that's going to be a positive 144. Alright, here's a little tricky thing. They got a fraction divided by a fraction. Here's a little rule. Really, think about 1 divided by 1/3. If I wrote it that way, it might look a little prettier. 1 is like 1 over 1. When you divide by a fraction, you might not remember this rule. That's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I can just kind of flip that upside down. So I end up with 1 over 1 times 3. Well, multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and you end up with just regular old 3. Alright, so then I got 144 minus 3 is 141. How's that? Not so bad, right? Alright, we got some word problems. They give you a formula. That sounds great. They ask you, what is the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit if it's negative 40 degrees Celsius? So basically, we're just going to say negative 40 equals C. And we're going to go ahead and substitute that in up here. So we end up with F equals 9/5 times negative 40 plus 32. All right, I got negative 40 in the top. I got 5 in the bottom. Let's reduce that to negative 8 over 1, because 40 divided by 5 is just negative 8. I got 9 times negative 8, which is negative 72, plus 32 equals negative 40. So, here's the kind of weird thing about it. If you're at negative 40 degrees Celsius, you're also negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's kind of funky. Huh. I guess that's why they gave you that particular problem. It's interesting. So, agriculture. Faith owns, yada, 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 yada. What is Faith's predicted profit if her orchard is 30 bushels of apples, right? So they tell you that X bushels of apples. So X represents the bushels. And since they're saying there's 300 bushels, that means X equals 300. So let's substitute. I got P equals 20 times 300 minus 0.01. 300 squared minus 240. Alright, look, if you set that up, that's fine. These numbers get a little nasty to do without the calculator. You could get kind of far, I guess. This one, if you figure 300 times 2 would be 600. So with an extra 0 there. So what you end up having is, if 300 times 2 would be 600, add an extra 0, instead of 600 you get 6,000. Alright, this basically tells us, well, we'll get to that in a second. 300 squared is 300 times 300. If it was 300 times 3, it'd be 900. So all you got to do is add on the extra zeros. So you're looking at 90,000. Now, when you multiply by 0.01, really you need to move that decimal point. It's going to make that number smaller, right? It's going to make it 2 decimal points smaller. So really you're looking at 900. All right, minus 240. Now it's not so bad. 6,000 minus 900 is 5,100. Minus 240. Let's see here. That's going to be whoops. For I don't want to do this in my head anymore. 4,860, I believe, right? Yeah. So it is possible to do that without a calculator, and that's the predicted profit. So let's go ahead and say that's dollars. Okay, this was negative 40 degrees. I'm going to double check that in my cell phone real quick just to make sure I got the numbers right. Okay, looks pretty good. Let's keep going on. Next page. Over here, number 11. Ew, I got to combine like terms. The only problem is this one has a fraction over it and this one doesn't. A couple ways you could do this problem. Probably the easiest thing for you guys to do would just be to add n to both sides. Now here's a little thought bubble. I got 5 halves n, and I want to add 1 n to it. Okay? Again, I need a common denominator if I'm going to add fractions. So think about 5 halves plus 1. I can rewrite that 1 as 2 over 2. Because 2 divided by 2 is still 1. Now I got a common denominator. That's nice because now that's 7 halves. So, you know that 5 halves plus 1 is 7 halves. So that means 5 halves n plus n is 7 halves n equals 98. Let's get rid of that 2 by multiplying both sides by 2. You end up with 7n equals 180 plus 196. Divide by 7. And you end up with n equals, what is that? 2 is 14, 56, so n equals 28. This one's a lot easier. Get your n's together by adding 2n to both sides. That gives you 6n. You're also going to subtract 20 from both sides. That gives you 33. Oh, is that right? 6n minus 20. Yep, they're making it mean on you. Divide by 6 on both sides. And you end up with n equals 33 over 6. If you wanted to change it to a decimal, you're looking at 5.5. Right? So either one. 33 over 6 is fine, though. You can leave it like that. This one, the same thing. Combine like terms. You got to add x to both sides. So that cancels out. I end up with 3x over here. And if I subtract 75 from both sides, I end up with, that cancels out. I end up with 27. Divide by 3. And x ends up equaling 9. Alright. This time I need to get b by itself. So here's b and I need to get it alone. First thing I'm going to do is add c to both sides. So I end up with a plus c equals 3b because these now cancel out. Now I need b by itself, so I need to divide by 3. Divide everybody over here by 3. That cancels out, and now I'm left with A plus C over 3 equals B. All right. B is by itself. We solve for B. Over here, I need to solve for T. T's stuck down here in the bottom, so first thing I'm going to do is try to get him to the top. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by T. When I do that, the T in the top cancels out with the T in the bottom, so I still have S over 2 equals 10T. Now I got to get rid of the 10, so let's divide by 10. Notice when I divide this side by 10, dividing by 10 is really the same as multiplying by 1 over 10. So really now I'm just going to split this 10 in the denominator with the 2. And I get S equals, S over 20. 10 times 2 is your 20 equals T. So we got T by itself. All right, over here, these shouldn't be too bad. I need to get R by itself, so I need to get rid of the 8. Let's subtract 8 from both sides. 8 minus 8 is 0, cancels out. 14 minus 8 is 6, equals negative 6R. Divide by negative 6. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 is 1. Over here, 6 divided by negative 6 is negative 1, so I'm left with negative 1 equals R. Over here, this one's kind of nasty. You got a lot of fractions going on. I'm going to show you a trick. What I would do is, I'm going to try to clear out these fractions. If I multiply by what would be the common denominator, you see how all of these are factors of 8? If I multiply 4 by 2, I get 8. If I multiply 2 by 4, I get 8. If I multiply 8 by 1, I get 8. So what I can do is, I'm going to multiply this entire equation by 8, and it's going to make my fractions disappear. So what happens is 8 over 4 reduces down to 2. Now the 3 is still sitting there up top. I got 8 over 2 reduces down to 4. But I still have that negative, and I got the 1 up top, and I got the n. This 8 over the 8 reduces down to 1, so I don't need to write that, but I still have the 5 left over. Okay. 2 times 3 is 6. 4 times 1 is 4 times n. And now all of a sudden it looks a lot nicer. Subtract 6 from both sides, and you end up with negative 4n equals negative 1. Divide by negative 4, and n equals 1/4. By the way, the directions say check your solution. Remember, you can always plug your answer back in to see if you got the right one. Let me just do it for this one while we're here. So what I'm saying is, if I'm checking my work, I'm saying that 1/2, I'm saying n is supposed to be 1/4. And the question is, does that equal 5/8? Well, 3/4 minus 1/2 times 1/4 is going to be 1/8. Uh-oh, need a common denominator. So I'm going to change the 3/4 into 6/8. Multiply the top and the bottom by 2. 6/8 minus 1/8 is 5/8, which is what it was supposed to equal. So that's how we know we got it right. Alright, over here, it's a simple two-step. It just has decimals, subtract by 5, and you get negative 1.6R equals negative 12.8. Divide by negative 6. Now, so the decimals make this a little tricky. What you can do, a little trick of the trade to get rid of these decimals, is multiply the entire equation, this time by 10. If I multiply by 10, that's going to move this decimal place over 1. It's going to move that one over 1. I'm allowed to do it as long as I do it on both sides. So then my new equation is negative 16R equals negative 128. And maybe that's a little easier for you to compute. And I think, what do you end up with? 16 times 8, I think, is going to work, right? 16 times 8 is 840, yep, 128. So that means this is really negative 128 divided by negative 16 is positive 8. All right, over here, distribute, of course, 30 minus 4v. Subtract v from both sides. Actually, you can add v. Adding 4v to both sides will probably be a little easier. And at the same time, I'm going to subtract 21 from both sides. So this cancels out to 0. That cancels out to 0. 30 minus 21 is 9 equals v plus 4v. Oh my gosh. Oh, I almost made a mistake. Let's try this again. This is 30 minus 20v. Forgot to distribute over here. All right, so let's try this again. So I add the 20v to both sides. I subtract the 21 from both sides. These guys cancel out. V plus 20v is 21v. 30 minus 21 is 9. Let's see here. Did I do that right? Yeah. So now we divide by 21. And you end up with some nastiness. But v equals 9 over 21. If you reduce that by a factor of 3, it's like 3 over 7. Can't be scared of your fractions over here. Oh. Solve this thing for m. That means we got to get m by itself, which means we got to eliminate this whole group. Easiest thing to do is just divide by the whole thing. So I end up with e over c squared equals m. Solve this guy for v. I need to get all of this mess over to the other side, so I'm going to just add it since it's negative. I'm going to add it to h, so I end up with h plus gt squared equals vt, because I added it to the other side. And to get v by itself, we need to divide by t. So v equals h plus gt squared over t. All right. Shazam. More word problems. More word problems. The length of a rectangle is twice the width. So I'm going to say L equals 2W. Find the width if the perimeter is 60. Sometimes it helps to draw a picture. Perimeter of the rectangle is 60. Here's length. Here's the width. But I know the length is really twice the width. And the whole thing is 60. So the perimeter going around. Well, perimeter, if you remember, is W plus W, which is like 2W, plus L, which is like 2L. But wait a second, L I can replace with 2W. And it says that the perimeter is 60, so I can replace this. That means I can replace the P with 60. So now really what I'm working with is 60 equals 2W plus 4W. 2W plus 4W is 6W. Divide by 6, and W equals 10. So there's your width. And they were asking me in centimeters, so really it's 10 centimeters. Luis and 3 friends went golfing. 2 of their friends rented clubs for $6 each. The total cost of the rental clubs and the green fees for each person was $76. What is the cost of the green fees? All right, the total is $76. What do you get for that? Luis and 3 of his friends go golfing. So altogether, that's 4 people. And it says the green fees for each person was $76. So 4 people. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not true. The total cost for the rental clubs for each person was okay. So we're looking for the green fees. I'm sorry. We're looking for the green fees. So let's call that G. And 4 people pay the green fees. 2 friends rented clubs for $6 each. So 2 people paid $6 each. So the other 2 didn't have to rent clubs, so there's no cost for them. But now we have a simple equation that we need to find the green fees. So here's the green fees. Here are the clubs. Since there are 4 people, you have 4 green fees. 2 people rented clubs for $6 each. So now let's just solve that. 6 times 2 is 12. When you have 12 there, I'm going to subtract from 12 both sides. That is 64. Right, divide by 4, and you end up with 16 equals G. So your green fees are $16. Qué fácil, ¿no? Qué fácil. Sí, por supuesto. All right. Here we go. Last side. Okay. Simple inequality. You can either distribute this to start out, or you could divide both sides by 7. It might be a little easier. It should take you to the same place. If you do it that way, you end up with 7a minus 9 is less than or equal to 12. Add 9 to both sides. You end up with 7a is less than or equal to 21. All right, divide by 7, and a is less than or equal to 3. So I'm going to go over here to 3. I'm going to draw a closed circle. Less than is everybody who's down here. Okay. Same thing over here. I think it's a little easier if you divide by 5. You could distribute. Well, you know what? Let's do it this time. They get you the same answer either way. That's going to give you 60 minus 15n is less than 165. Subtract 60 from both sides. You get negative 15n is less than 5. Is that right? I'm sorry. Less than 105. Whoops. Alright, less than 105. Divide both sides by negative 15. Uh-oh, watch out. Here's the catch. When you divide both sides by a negative, you have to flip the sign. Alright, again, key thing, when you divide both sides by a negative, like I am here, when I divide by negative 15, you got to make sure you switch the sign, so now it's greater than. So then I have n is going to be greater than, what is that, 9? Nope. How about 7? Yeah. So you end up with negative 7 over here. For some reason, the negatives didn't print off that well. These are all supposed to be negative. So if you're greater than negative 7, then you're from negative 7 with an open circle because it's not greater than or equal to, and you're going this way. Alright, down here. Here I go ahead and distribute. You got negative 28x. It's going to turn to positive 14. Alright, 4x minus 2, okay. Add 28 to both sides to get the x's together. And you end up with, let me write it over here, 32x is greater than, I'm going to add 2 over here to get that by itself. Okay, so what I did was I added 2 to both sides to make that cancel. I added 28 to make that cancel. All right, divide by 32. And 32 divided by 32 cancels out. You got x is greater than 16 over 32. Really reduces down to just little old 1/2. 1/2 is somewhere in between 0 and 1. I'm going to draw an open circle because it's strictly greater than, not greater than or equal to. And it's greater than, so we're going this way. All right. Over here, this one's simple 2-step. Subtract 15 from both sides, and you get 2.5d is less than or equal to 60. Divide by 2.5. Again, if you don't like the decimals, little trick, multiply everybody by 10, and that just allows you to scoot your decimal point over. So then I have 25d is less than or equal to 600. So think about how many quarters are in $6, right? So you got $4, or 4 quarters for each dollar, and there's $6, so it's 24. So you end up with D is less than or equal to 24. So I go to 24. This time I'm drawing a closed circle because it's less than or equal to. And it's going that way. So there you have it. There's step by step how to do the homework. We're going to have a quiz when you come in tomorrow, Thursday. And I'll see you then.